Hi all. The book of Habakkuk is one of my favorite books. Habakkuk reminds me that faith in God is neither a leap in the dark nor a denial of reality. Faith in God actually enables us to confront the most painful and puzzling circumstances in all their gritty harshness. Habakkuk is confronting the injustice and pain in a fallen world while affirming and holding on to the goodness of God who rules in absolute sovereignty. Habakkuk asks questions because the realities of life seem to deny what the Bible teaches about God. But he speaks with faith seeking understanding. Hear the opening words of Habakkuk. O Lord, how long shall I cry for help and you will not hear? Or cry to you violence and you will not save? Why do you make me see iniquity and why do you idly look at wrong? Destruction and violence are before me. Strife and contention arise. So the law is paralyzed and justice never goes forth. For the wicked surround the righteous, so justice goes forth perverted. We know that Habakkuk speaks to God in faith because he is bringing his complaint to Yahweh, his covenant Lord, and not to anyone else. He talks to God with a humble heart, longing to hear from him. Furthermore, Habakkuk's cry is founded on the character of God as it is revealed in his word. So you might say that Habakkuk's faith does not alleviate or minimize his distress. Habakkuk's faith is the cause of his distress. He believes that God is actively involved in the affairs of this world. That's why he says to God, "You cause me to look." He believes that God is righteous and will not tolerate sin, and yet all he sees is God seems to be silent and inactive. That's why he asks, "How long?" Habakkuk recognizes that the continued prevalence of evil raises questions about God's goodness and sovereignty. And at the heart of his cry, he wants God to act in order to vindicate the honor of his name. Now, we know that God did not have to respond, but God graciously responds to Habakkuk. But God's answer to him leaves him even more confused. God tells Habakkuk he is about to punish Judah by handing them over to the Babylonian Empire. But the Babylonians were so bad, they made the people of Judah look good. God's plan seemed to be an even bigger miscarriage of justice. God seemed to be rewarding the Babylonians' reputation for cruelty and brutality. Even worse, since the outcome of battles between nations were understood to be determined by the power of the gods that the nations worshipped, the defeat of Judah to Babylon would be attributed to the inferiority of Yahweh to the Babylonian pantheon. So in Habakkuk's mind, surely the cure was worse than the disease. So Habakkuk persists in asking questions, doing so in humility and submission. And again, graciously, God answers and tells Habakkuk, don't worry, there is no miscarriage of justice because God is executing the judgment that Judah deserves. And the Babylonians would also be judged in due time. They were simply being the instruments of God's judgment. And when the Babylonians are judged, then Yahweh would ultimately be vindicated. But until then, God's response is this: the just shall live by faith. Now, God's first response to Habakkuk, that he was about to send the Babylonians to punish Judah, shows us something very important. It tells us that God is at work even when we do not see it. You see, far from being an idle spectator, God was busy shaping the social-political landscape in order to turn Babylon into a world power. This involved not only installing strong leadership in Babylon, it also involved weakening Babylon's rivals such as Assyria and Egypt. Habakkuk exposes our limited perspective. And that is a comfort to us during times of darkness, when we are frustrated by our failure to make sense of our situation and our inability to find a way to escape our dilemma. Appearances notwithstanding, we must and we can trust that God is exerting his mighty sovereign hand on our behalf, even when we do not see it. Faith enables us to perceive the realities that are hidden to human eyes. Babylon's rise to power was no accident. It was the purposeful act of God who was intending to use them to discipline his wayward people. That world-shaping turn of events was driven by God's plans for his people. We live in a highly secularized world dominated by materialist assumptions. So it is easy to forget that God calls the shots, be it in politics, economics, human conflicts, or natural disasters. And God is superintending all events with a view to consummating his plans for his people. As significant as affairs in North America, in Europe, in Asia might seem to us, they are but God's means of keeping his promises to his people, even if we do not necessarily understand how the pieces of the puzzle fit together. God's second response to Habakkuk, that he would also punish the Babylonians, reminds us of the inconceivable breadth of God's plans. His purposes are far greater than the best human minds could imagine. Habakkuk's perplexity was a means for God to strengthen his faith and lead him into a deeper understanding of his ways. All Habakkuk could see were the immediate implications of Babylon's conquest of Judah. God reminds Habakkuk, "For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea." See, ultimately, God would not be accused of being unjust, for we know that a day is coming when he will glorify himself by judging the world and setting everything straight. In fact, looking at this passage from this side of the cross, we realize that he has already begun to execute judgment on the cross of Calvary. Because on the cross, Jesus suffered the punishment his people deserved. The suffering of Jesus anticipates the judgment that would fall on those who have not bowed the knee to him. And furthermore, in the resurrection of Jesus, he brings into existence the new creation that will be consummated at his return, for which all creation, laboring under the curse, breathlessly waits. See, that's why God could say to Habakkuk, "The earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord from sea to sea." God sees the end from the beginning. We see only a small part, and that with blurred vision. God's timetable is different from ours, and he is not about to alter his timetable to accommodate our misguided wishes. Faith in God means learning to evaluate our present circumstances from the standpoint of God's eternal purposes. Moreover, faith in God means committing ourselves to waiting for the Lord to act on our behalf. We will not give in to despair. We will not give in to complaint. We will trust and we will wait, even if God's pace seems too slow. Till tomorrow, let's look at the world through the lens of God's promises, and let's bring our questions to him. For the Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth keep silence before him.